Thanks for tuning into episode 185 of the Coffee Roaster Warm Sessions podcast. This episode, we build off of our mini-series on coffee flavor profiles. The first episode was on coffee flavor profiles by origin. The second was by processing method. And this episode is all about coffee varietals. We dive into the differences between Arabica and Robusta, and then jump into some of the common coffee varietals that you might see on bags and what you should expect out of those flavor profiles. Now, before we get into the episode, I just want to give a heads up to our longtime podcast listeners. First off, thank you so much for tuning in episode after episode. But you also know that we periodically drop a no-label dial-in batch. Now, I'm pleased to announce that today, as this episode airs, we dropped a new no-label dial-in batch coffee. This coffee is loud, it's big, it's fruity. It's, if you like coffees that are a little bit more experimental processed, this will be the coffee that you want to pick up. It's decently discounted. There's very limited supplies because this was a smaller batch and we don't have very much of this coffee. So jump in there, pick up yourself a bag, enjoy it, and enough yapping, enough talking. Let's get into this episode. It is spring in full swing, and I'm enjoying every little bit of it. Nice sun out. Hopefully.
Did you see the lows are dropping into upper 40s again?
Oh, I thought when I heard lows, I thought
or
Lowe's.
the highs. Sorry.
When I heard lows, I thought Lowe's, like the construction department store. I was like, Lowe's is dropping what? A new product line? A new dripper? What?
No, the weather's going to be pretty cool this week.
But it's nice. As we always dive into every episode, we drink some batchy. So let's pour some drip coffee, see what's brewing today, and get into it. But it was nice to spend a week in Guatemala with some nice warm temperatures. It was like almost perfect the entire week.
Even up in the mountains in
high 60s, low 70s, with nice little breeze. So yeah, it's very nice. And then to come back to spring in Bellingham was even nicer. So
yeah, we had a fairly warm week. I'm just not excited for a week of rain that's projected.
It just needs to go.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's time.
It's ruining my... I had a photo shoot on Sunday that got canceled because of the rain.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Like, super bummed about that.
It's interesting. It has like a different texture and flavor experience than I'd say most coffees that I've been drinking lately. I don't know.
Really?
What are you getting on this?
It's good. It's okay. It's almost like I would consider, for me, this is a daily driver. Dang. Not in the category of like Guats. This is definitely not a Guatemalan coffee. It's super
far
nice.
from it.
Yeah. Is it that Ecuador coffee again?
Mm-mm.
No. The reason it reminded me of that was like it has a very unique acidity to it, not like a Colombian coffee.
Yeah, that's what I meant by like the flavor experience
that's
is a little
very unique.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not. Maybe I've just been drinking because most of my coffee consumption right now is like Colombian coffees. Yeah. Maybe that's why I'm drinking this. And this is an origin that I'm not drinking actually regularly. Yeah. I don't even remember the last time I drank this origin, but...
What is this, Brazil?
No, definitely not.
I'm just kidding.
You could taste the Brazil from like a mile away. It's just like it has a unique, like a very unique, distinct flavor experience. I don't know how to explain it, but it's got like this, some like deep...
It's a Bolivia.
Deep fruits, and then, but also a lot of like tangy... I don't know. What's your flavor notes on this? It's not a Bolivia.
Notes on this? Oh, I'll be honest. I don't want to sound like a jerk, but it just doesn't have a good clarity. It has good acidity. It has like generically, like I can't. Maybe my palate is whack because I've cupped a decent amount of coffees today. Not a lot, but decent amount. And I have, like work kind of cupping where you have to like actually do. This is not like.
It's got a little bit of candidness to it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fine.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say about it, honestly. I'm like,
what do you think is the origin on this? Give me.
Dude, Mexico.
Wow, that's a terrible guess.
I don't know.
And then what's so hard
to say?
I
don't even know what the varietal.
What do you think the varietal is? That's the real question
for
this episode.
Ooh, yeah, you're right. The varietal would probably be for only one reason. I do taste a little bit of grape on it.
Grape.
Okay. And that's why I would probably lean towards Bourbon.
Interesting. Okay.
That's it. That's all I got for you. I'm out of shape today.
That's it.
Well, what is it? Tell me. I want to know.
It's a Peruvian coffee.
Oh yeah, nice. I was gonna say Peru, but I was like, it can't be.
Peruvian red Bourbon.
Okay.
So we'll give Sergi that. We'll give him a solid point for the Bourbon.
Yeah.
And a half a point for origin because Ecuador, it's in proximity. So
okay, gotcha.
But yeah, this is a Peruvian washed red Bourbon roasted by Prodigal. I know.
Wow, I'm shocked.
Yeah, but it's fairly light. I think on the roast, probably lighter than some of the other ones that I've had from him.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if that's just my perception or not, but
weird.
I think the flavor notes on it, if I'm not mistaken, is grapefruit. Man, I don't know.
Oh, at least I got half a word right.
Yeah, exactly. So
dang, that's weird.
Yeah. So
dude, so odd. Yeah, I'm shocked. Like, hey,
I'm gonna get some more, but you should kick off our talk here.
Yes, we've been on this trend and of podcast episodes where we're breaking down flavor based on certain characteristics of the coffee. One was origin, two was processing, and today we're going to cover varietal. I think one of the things, if you've been following us through this journey of like unlocking flavor, one of the things that I hope that every listener gets from it is understanding that you can't just separate one of the things and say all of the flavor comes because it's this. There's a lot of things at play. Origin or terroir, where the coffee is grown, is a major thing at play. Even breaking down how the coffee is processed is going to depend on origin. Not all places in the world can do a natural wash in a honey, or not all producers can have bioreactors to do a thermal shock. So origin and farm is going to depend. That's going to be dependent on it too. And then not every part of the world can grow, or better yet, not every varietal tastes the same in different parts of the world. Correct. So I don't think these conversations that we've been having are not really, I wasn't going to say cut and dry, but they're all interconnected. So if you're listening to this episode after listening to of the others, you got to kind of listen to it or read into it as like a chapter book. This is one big book, but there's different facets of this conversation when it comes to flavor. Second of all, as I hope that these 3 episodes help every listener or confirm some ideas that they've already had about how to distinguish a coffee bag on a shelf and how to purchase coffee. Because for me, when I remember when I just dove into coffee, a lot of my decision based was made on origin, simply origin. I didn't know many producers. I didn't know a lot of the processing. I just know, I really like coffee from Ethiopia. Correct. So whatever. I didn't even know what Yirgacheffe was. I couldn't even quote unquote pronounce it. And then I heard of Gucci, and I'm like, Gucci, like the clothing brand, like what? So like origin is usually where a lot of people start, and there's a lot of validity to that. And then second, once you start hanging out with coffee and coffee people, you start to realize processing methods, and I think that's the next one that determines And then you start realizing that a coffee from Ethiopia processed naturally tastes different than a coffee from Ethiopia processed washed. You start picking up those nuances. And I feel like the longer you stay in the industry, depending on what you do in the as a coffee professional or as a home barista even, you start to understand, like I'm picking up like the same flavor from coffees processed different ways from different origins. Why is that same flavor there? And that's when you start diving into varietals, I even remember for me back in the day when I did the SEA, I think I did majority of the SEA courses in coffee, so quote unquote coffee school. And I remember diving through that and talking about even the main divisions of coffee, which we'll dive into, like the main, like the genome of coffee, right? Before you get into the varietals. Even that, then I'm like, I've always known that by flavor, but now I'm kind of putting words to it. Mm-hmm. So hopefully we may not go into like insane detail on this episode, but hopefully people listening will understand that like the genetics of coffee, like deeper understanding of the genetics of coffee will help you understand the flavor of coffee, which then could potentially help you shop for coffee. Or if you've been in the industry, like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, oh yeah, I've been brewing at home, and now that I hear this, I get why I usually lean towards buying this coffee. And I don't know what that bourbon thing said there, but it's actually a Bourbon and it's a coffee varietal. Hopefully that brings confirmation. But yeah, makes sense? I don't know. I just went on a ramble of things to talk about there. I think with that said, like one, kind of opening up the conversation because this is such a prominent varietal in specialty. And for us, do you remember the first time you had a geisha?
I don't, to be honest.
Really?
I don't. I think I just at some point, with the hype around it, I just remember trying them and then realizing that they're really, really tasty and really, really good and really, really sought after. And I think, I don't think I'd remember the most like the first time that I had a geisha. I mean, I remember the Best of Panama #1, mm-hmm. but that definitely was not my first geisha. Yeah. But yeah, like I think a geisha is one of those varietals that's really a great starting point because it is so distinct. It's like when you taste a well roasted geisha that's well processed, it's automatically like mm-hmm. lots of florals, super delicate, very well structured. Yeah. All the great little stone fruits, the florals, the oranges, the vanillas. Like I remember when we were just cupping, a Peru geisha that unfortunately just sold out right before we snagged it. But that was like on a table full of like 6-8 coffees. It was like stuck out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, it was very obvious.
It was very obvious and very like. Sometimes you just try them and then you're like, I hate that I like this because it's so. You know what it is. Yeah. It's so annoying that but it's just so good because that's what it is. And I don't think you can. Speaking of varietals, I don't think you can get the geisha flavor profile drinking a Caturra, Castillo, Colombia. It's just so out there. Yeah. But that's also what makes it so, like the value in the geisha, so to speak, is that it's so distinct with its unique flavor profile. So I think for me, I can tell you exactly the date of the first geisha I've ever had, and that was. As far as I remember, February 2017 at Verve in Santa Cruz. Mm-hmm. The two things to me stuck out. I was looking at the menu and I'm like, dude, especially in 2017, like who pays $17 or it was $12 for a pour over. Right.
Plus they were using the mod bar. It wasn't a hand pour. Interesting. And I was like, 2017, $12 for a pour over plus tips, like $15 coffee there. Why? Mm-hmm. And I remember that it was a geisha. I remember that I was like, what does that even mean? But I was so intrigued that I was like, okay, if this is my cup of coffee of the day and I'm in Santa Cruz, don't know when I'll come back to Verve, I'm going to cop it. And I got it, and I was absolutely blown away for a few reasons. It was a classic. I believe it was a Panamanian Geisha. That was around the hype of like the best of Panama, I believe, if I'm not wrong. It's been a while. It's almost 10 years ago when I had my first Geisha. So it's like the aromatics, the florality of it, like straight bergamot, like insane florality was just like, it just kind of, before you even tasted anything, it just kind of filled your just whole body with just this deep, deep smell. And then in combination, because bergamot is very similar to like a combination of like, you know, tea and citrus. It's like got this citrusy thing going on, like big citrus. And then the flavor, all of the sweetness was this delicate watermelon and tropical fruit sweetness in that cup. It was honestly, at that point, was the best coffee I've ever had. And to this day, like, geishas tend to be my favorite coffees in general. Yeah. Again, maybe not a daily driver because they're pricey. They're very complex. They're kind of like they can be very weird, especially we've talked about the Macava coffees here and all of the competition coffees. A lot of the times, not always, are competition coffees geishas or geishas, you know? So I remember that sticks out. Like that was a big one. And that's when I was very intrigued. Why is this coffee so different than the other coffees? Especially hearing that word. And I think for a lot of people, especially when you're just diving into understanding like varietals, you're realizing that like not all coffees taste the same. And I think the easiest distinction, and I know I'm taking a little step back in this conversation, but the easier distinction is the fact that there are two main genomes of coffee. There's coffee Arabica and there's coffee Robusta or Canafora, right? Those two, this is the polar opposite question of the geisha question, is do you remember having your first Robusta?
I don't.
Dude.
I don't even know last time I had one.
I brewed you a Robusta.
I think that was actually one that you might have you got from Indonesia.
I got one from Indo, but remember during 2020 lockdowns during COVID, I bought coffee, the Vietnamese Robusta from New York, blue bag, remember? And we brewed it.
Oh, yep. That was the last time I had it. Yep.
And you absolutely hated it, one. There's like, that's another thing, is like, if there's a Robusta on a cupping table, no one's gonna miss it. Yeah. I don't care if you've never tasted coffee before. Yeah. But if I give you an Arabica and a Robusta, you won't say these are the same things. You won't say they both taste the same. Doesn't matter. Like the distinction in the genome between an Arabica coffee and a Robusta coffee is night and day. And that's why a lot of the coffees, or I would say 100% of the coffees that we drink, come from the Arabica genome. But within that, there's a ton of different varieties. So I think that's also interesting. If you're like, oh, maybe you like stumble upon the pod and you're like trying to be like, what are these guys talking about? Like, honestly, maybe snag some Robusta to kind of dial in that palate and like give you a little rubbery flavor on it. And then you can move on to Arabica. But I think with that said, geishas, again, we kind of already talked about how distinct they are in flavor. The other side of geishas is knowing the fact that, one, this is a varietal that completely moved from Ethiopia to South America, or to Central America, to the rest of the world, that is. And with that said, like, it does carry a lot of the traits of what we like about Ethiopian coffees. You know, we talked about this on the previous episode about origin, is like the fact that Ethiopian coffees tend to have a lot of good, nice, bright acidity, florals, and sometimes a berry flavor. So I think if you already you like Ethiopian coffees, and you want to kind of expand that, or you've been on that train already, I would highly recommend finding a good, and if you have a favorite roasting company that's already serving a geisha, I would dive into that just to get some of that flavor within those characteristics that you already probably like because of origin. So again, another ramble. Just keep going on.
What's the next varietal?
The next one. Oh, let's talk about Bourbon. That has been, I think, between you and I, has been our, from a roaster's perspective, our daily driver. We've like always had a Bourbon in our menu as far as I remember. Am I correct?
I think, yeah, pretty sure.
Yeah. Because I believe like Jorge Mendez's coffee was a Bourbon, right, from day one.
It was a blend.
It was a field blend, but Bourbon was one of the flavor notes on there. And I would say when it comes to Bourbons, you and I have distinctly, like right now, when we did a little sip, like as soon as we dove into the cup, I was like, if I had to guess, there's this little tinge of quote unquote grape, not grapefruit, but this kind of acidity that's a little juicier, like thicker to me. It's not super citrusy, but it is like juicier, probably a Bourbon. And that's one of the flavor notes that we pick out, or one of the varietals that we also pick out on the cupping table quite often is like, oh, okay. Yep. Know that varietal. So I really like Bourbons for a few reasons. They do have a little bit of the similarities of coffees that, similar to a Geisha, but not the same. They have a little bit of similarity of that juiciness, of that maybe not fully citric acidity, but closer to the grape acidity. Like they have that, but they're also very easy to drink. They have fairly good balance. They, most of the time, if they're roasted really, really well, depends on the roast level, they'll have this like stone fruit plum sweetness on it that I absolutely love. And then depending, of course, like we've tasted like Jorge's coffees on multiple roast levels, and then that flavor can sometimes just transform to just this rich bodied, round, almost like nougaty, chocolatey, caramely sweetness that I think is just super dope.
Yeah. What do you think about pink Bourbon within all the other Bourbons?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's the one that I have more common than any of the other ones. Maybe yellow Bourbon is another. There's like what I'm trying to remember, red, yellow, pink, right? And I think the pink one is very common for our menu. So I find that to be, again, like it's slightly brighter, has a little brightness, but it's not like this crazy like citric acidity brightness on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's also an African varietal that was moved over. Yeah. So it's probably going to be likened very closly more towards. I mean, it's got some overlap with a Geisha. So like when you look at like our last sourcing cupping, there was a semi-washed pink Bourbon, Geisha, semi-washed Geisha, and like an anaerobic washed pink Bourbon, and they didn't taste the same by no means. Like that's not, again, a Geisha is going to be very different and unique, but man, did they have similar qualities? Yeah. Like, yeah. And pink Bourbons are just really excellent, and it makes sense because they're a varietal that were brought over, which we like. I think for a while we didn't really know that until I think the last like 4 years. I think somebody at the world stage or national stage used a pink Bourbon. Yeah. And then everybody that's where like the talk came that it's pretty much like a Geisha. Yeah. It's very similar, not pretty much like a Geisha. Sorry.
I've heard two streams of thoughts. I think one, and man, I might be wrong, so sorry, Isaiah, but I believe Isaiah Sheesh used a Bourbon when he won USBC. But I've heard two streams of thoughts and ideas is that Bourbons are a stem of a Geisha from Ethiopia. But I've also traditionally heard that Bourbon originated from Typica or was grown with Typica. I don't, again, if someone has very direct evidence, like you're in the comment section, especially on YouTube, post an article there to help me understand this. But from what I understand is that it came from Typica as well from Yemen. So I've heard both. Not sure which one's 100% true. But yeah, I think that's another great thing about like that varietal is that it doesn't cost as much as a Geisha for sure, price-wise when it comes to green, but it is hitting the world stage on this like crazy level that makes it very prominent as a great coffee. And I love that because it's also one of those coffees that if we were, again, to serve it to our mom would love it. She wouldn't like freak out about it, you know? Maybe. But it's also like very interesting for us. It's like that middle of the road. Like it's not super crazy funky or super delicate. I think a lot of the times when people try, I've had this said to me in the cafe one time, when people try a geisha, they're like, oh, this tastes like tea. Like, why would I have this if I want coffee? Why can't I just have Earl Grey tea? And there's that like, oh, it's so light bodied. Like I want something a little more punchy. And that's a preference thing. I get it. But I feel like some folks can be very picky with the geisha, where Bourbon has the similarities of the geisha, but it's actually way more approachable as a varietal for a lot of people. So
there's a ton more varietals to talk through.
Yeah.
Like there's Sudamru, Cedra, Choroso, all these newer varietals that have been coming up. But let's dive into SL-28, SL-34.
Yeah.
Give me your take on it.
Oh, who was it? I think it was either Scott or Christopher Farron mentioned something about it's nowadays, like today, 2025, it's really, really hard to find a classic Kenyan SL-28 single varietal coffee. Super challenging. And I'm kind of sad about that. Both you and I love Kenyan coffees. And when you find a like true SL-28 from Kenya, it's also like no other. It doesn't taste like a geisha, not even close. It does not taste like a Bourbon. And one of the things to recognize is the whole varietal, the SL-28, 30, and 34 varietals, they were created in a lab specifically so that it can resist either drought or a lot of water because of the climate in Kenya. So going back to what I was saying is like, you kind of can't strip the varietal from the origin too, because there's a lot of the times that these varietals are created because of origin situations at origin, right? So the distinction of that, I think when it comes to flavor profile, like if you fell in love with Kenyan coffees, it was probably SL-38, and it was probably because it had very big either blackberry flavor on it, right? Or you had something that was along the lines of like a black currant, very big, juicy, sweet, just complex, a lot of citrus on it, like super fantastic coffees. I don't know, like I don't know if I'm crazy or not, but when was the last time you've seen a roasting company have a straight up SL-28 and not like a 28, 34 and a Ruru 11 blend?
Yeah,
maybe Prodigal had a SL-28, but not from Kenya.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think I just vaguely remember seeing something like that and actually just being surprised because it's not very common.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's kind of like a rare occurrence to just see it as a single varietal. Now it's become rare.
Yeah.
I mean, for those who have been drinking coffee for a while, it used to be a little bit more popular, but yeah.
So I think that's SL-28s are great. If anyone knows of a single varietal SL-28 from Kenya, that a roasting company that's serving it, that does a nice light roast on it, please let me know. I would love to cop a bag as soon as possible because I like it. When is, to put you on the spot here, but when's the harvest for Kenyan coffees?
I'm not sure exactly when harvest is. I just know that they land late spring, early summer with all the other Ethiopians. So fresh stuff is on the way. Yeah. Ethiopian coffees, I think, have just been shipped out of Ethiopia. So I'm assuming Kenya's probably give or take around there. So
around there, yeah. I like SL-28s as well, and I think the reason out of those three, when we're talking about those three, all three of these varietals are fairly distinct. So hopefully, as you kind of process, there's a lot of crossover between varietals and origin, and again, processing methods. And there's a lot more, like Mark mentioned, a lot of more varietals than we can actually unpack on this episode. But I think for me, those three really stick out. Those three have a major distinction in my mind, at least. Some of the other ones, especially that like Sudan Room, Cedra, those are like popping up. They have their own distinction. But if you've been in the game, if you've been brewing coffee, whether in a cafe or just at home, you know those three varietals. And those three varietals probably have played a big role in your flavor palette development, and then probably played a big role in how you choose coffee when you're purchasing coffee, whether online or in a store. So if you're listening to this and there's something that really like hit the spot, like, oh, I have a very similar experience, please share it. Like, I love to hear that. I'd love to like be like, oh, sick. Like, I'm not the only one that thinks that. So share a comment like that. But also, if you're kind of new to the game, like, and you're listening to the pod and you're trying to figure out like where, like, I like this about coffee, how do I find that? Take a peek at varietals. Take a peek at the coffee label that says, oh, Bourbon, Geisha, SL-28, Ruru 11, SL-34. Take a peek at those things and try to purchase your next bag of coffee based on that.
There you have it, friends. Just a guide to coffee flavor profiles by varietal. Hopefully this was insightful and all the good stuff. Share this with somebody. But remember, as we always say, reflect what's good.